Hi everybody. What I'm going to do this evening is cook a meal for the family for tomorrow. I'm going to visit my daughter, her two little boys, her husband, and my son Ross is coming with, so I'm cooking a meal for 6 people, and what they want is shepherd's pie and then an apple crumble. So the first thing we're going to do, always before we start cooking, wash your hands. I put out the ingredients that we're going to use: minced beef, onions, and I never bother to chop my own onions. I buy them frozen. I like this because there's no waste at all. We've got potatoes, we've got carrots and some ginger, just to give it a little bit of bite. Not too much because the kids are only 2 and 4, so they don't want anything that's too hot. So what I use, chopping board, and generally I use my 2 favourite knives, but very important that knives are sharp. If they're not sharp, they actually can be quite dangerous. What I'm going to do with the carrots, because they can remain fairly tough and without pre-cooking, so we'll put these in boiling water before we add them to the what is basically, I suppose, a bolognese. Although I have to say that you ask anybody from Bologna what a bolognese sauce is and they'll tell you it's tomato sauce, not a meat sauce, but that's what we call it in England. Just chop them into small pieces like that. You'll notice with the sharp knife it becomes really quite an easy thing to do. So that's the carrot prepped. As far as the ginger is concerned, I just chop it up. I don't even bother to take the skin off. The other thing that I tend to do is to boil the water in the kettle rather than on the stove. It's much quicker in the kettle, and probably, I'm not an expert, it probably uses a little bit less fuel, which of course is part of the cost of cooking a meal. So that's going to boil, and I'm going to put the carrots on to cook, and then we'll start with the meat, which I'm going to do the costings on the full price, which was £2 and 2p for each 500 grams, and I'm actually going to cook a kilo of it, which might be slightly too much, hopefully, so we'll get an extra meal out of it. But you're going to get a minimum of 6 portions out of this. And we'll go through the costings, actual costings later on. What I'm going to do is I'm going to cook the onions off first, and then cook the meat and add what I want to on that side. I'm putting a bit of oil in the wok, and we'll get that up to heat quite quickly. As you can see, my trusty wok has had a lot of use. What I'm going to do, and you see that I never really measure things properly, do it by the handful, a couple of large handfuls of the onions. Then the packet of onions can go back in the freezer for the next time. I prefer to use wooden tools in the wok, and we'll just give those a quick shifty round so that they all get covered in the oil, and we'll just let those cook through. And that only takes a couple of minutes. Right, the onions are now translucent, so what we're going to do is just put them quickly into a bowl. ready to add them later. And I'm now going to put the meat in. Turn the heat on again. Just putting the meat into cook because I want the meat to cook through. So I'm going to put it all in. So it's a kilo of mincemeat, and this is fairly low fat. And what I do with this is I just give it a scrunch up like that, break it all up, because it cooks easier like that. And this is going to take just a few minutes to cook through. And we just leave that to cook through and then turn it over and just keep bashing it like that until it's all cooked through. Then we'll put the onions back on. And we can then remove any extra oil that's in there so it's not too fatty. So what I'm doing here is I'm just turning it so that it cooks through evenly, and once all the pink's gone, it's cooked through, and we can start adding other ingredients to it. But I like the wok rather than a frying pan because these sides are higher, so it doesn't tend to spill out. I think you'll see in later videos that I use my wok probably more than anything else. And this is, it's beginning to turn, so we'll leave that just for a minute or two to cook through. And whilst that's cooking through, I'm going to open a can of chopped tomatoes. Now these tomatoes are really cheap. I get them from Lidl, and they're only 28p. I've tried more expensive ones, and it doesn't actually seem to be any difference at all. You can pay 37p for the same thing, and the only difference is there's a ring pull. But it's such an easy can just to open with a tin opener. It hardly seems worth the extra expense. Well, the meat's cooked through, so we're going to add the onions and tin of tomato. It's chopped tomato. And I'm now going to go into the cupboard and find some tomato paste, because that seems to add a depth to the flavour. And again, just a good squeeze of tomato paste, probably about a quarter of a tube. We'll give this a good mix. Just make sure you turn it over in the pan so you get all the tomato going all through the meat, and also the onions as well. Now I'm going to add some black pepper. Now, I'm not going to put any extra salt in, but what I do put in, which might surprise some people, is a smallish teaspoon of sugar. And that counteracts the acid in the tomato. Just sprinkle that over, and then we'll mix it in. Now, if I wasn't cooking for the kids, I'd be sticking some garlic in there. But what I'm going to do now is to just add the ginger. And there's not enough in my hand to overwhelm it. It'll just add a bit of flavour. Right, I'm going to turn the heat down now. I'm going to leave that just to simmer gently for a few minutes whilst I cook the carrots rather. Lovely boring job peeling potatoes. I mean, you know, if money's no problem, you can buy ready-made mash, but I don't think it's really half as nice as using proper potatoes. So what I do with the potatoes is get them peeled and chop them into fairly smallish pieces because they're going to get mashed anyway, because they cook quicker like that. You know, with gas prices going up, we do need to sort of keep an eye on cooking times, I suppose, more than we did before. So now potatoes peeled, I just chop it in half and just cut it up into pieces like that. Also carrots are now cooked through, so we're going to just turn the gas off and empty them into a colander. There's always a couple that stick in the pan. Right, and these can go straight into the mix. And that is the sauce, pretty well done. And I suppose the total time, including cooking, about 15 minutes. So all we're going to do now is finish cooking peeling the potatoes, and we'll cook those till they're soft and mash them. So what I'm going to do now, I'm just going to let that simmer with the carrots for just a few minutes, and then we can turn that off. That's all ready, and that can go in the bowl. What I might do is just add some herby ingredients, and I tend to buy my herbs in big bottles like that because it's very much cheaper than buying the smaller ones and last a long, long time. That is, of course, when Ross doesn't nick it.
Editing that bit out.
Don't you dare. And again, we just fold all the herbs into that. There's not a huge amount, it just gives it, again, added flavour, and that's what I'm always trying to do, is just add flavour. So that's all ready just to simmer for a few minutes longer whilst we're doing the potatoes. You could do this anytime. You can even do it the day before you make the pie itself. So that's all fine. I'm going to turn that off now and just move that over because I want to use the big burner in the middle for the potatoes. I'm just adding a bit of salt to the potatoes, not a lot, and I always use sea salt. It seems to taste much better than the cheaper stuff. Not a huge amount, just a little pour like that. And you'll see I've removed a lot of the oil from the meat, which makes it healthier to eat. and that will be put into a little plastic ice cream container and thrown away, not poured down the sink, because that's a very quick way of blocking up all your sink system. Not a clever thing to do. So we'll leave that on the side ready to pour away. Well, the potatoes are now finished, so we're going to just whack them into colander. Back into the saucepan. I'm going to, my glasses have steamed up beautifully. I'm going to add some milk to this. Just a good splash. I'm not a great one of for measuring. That'll do. And I'm now going to go into the cupboard, find some butter. I don't keep butter in the fridge. Well, I do, but not butter that I'm actually using. We can just take a fairly good lump like that into the saucepan. Put the butter away again before the dog gets hold of it. And then we can give the potatoes a good old mash. They're lovely and soft, so this will be quite a good mash. Now absorbing all the milk and the butter. Just make sure you get all the lumps out. I'm now going to spoon the meat mix, lovely meat, carrots, bit of ginger, into the bowl, into the dish, which will then be covered in you want to get it about, I suppose, well covered, fairly thick so everybody gets a decent bit of meat. I'm now going to put some in this second little dish, which I can have at a later date, or Ross will have as he decides to nick it. Stop laughing, Ross. There we go. And then the rest into the dish. And the wok into the sink for the washing up. Bring the spoon, and then we can spoon this lovely mash. Get the stuff out of the way. I'm just going to even this out a bit, and then we can put the mash on the top. Just fork it over so it's fairly even. Get it right to the sides. And what we're going to do is just give it a good fork, because that will then brown nicely. So that's all ready, and we can do the little dish now, and then we'll put them both in the oven for about 20 minutes to half an hour until the tops are nicely browned. So we'll cover that. Now to make what is virtually, I suppose, 7 portions, I've used about 8 medium-sized potatoes. And that's the whole lot. I mean, as you'll see, the great thing about using mash is there's really no waste at all. With this dish, absolutely everything gets used. The only thing, obviously, that gets thrown away is potato peels. But really, if you, I suppose the healthiest way to do it is not even to peel the potatoes. Just chop them up, boil them, and you can make a good mash. Right, this is now going to go in the oven. That's 1 and 2, and we'll leave those in there for about 20 minutes. As you can see, my wok is steel, so to save it getting rusty, what I do, just put a little drop of oil, literally a tiny drop, and just with some kitchen paper, and then it's ready to store it among the rusty, and that's it. I'm now going to take the shepherd's pie out of the oven. There we are, and that's all nicely cooked, ready to take down to friends tomorrow. And this is my little extra portion here. And that's it, very simple, quick to make. I'll give you the costings later. Thanks for watching. See you again. Bye.